They say desperation makes you do unthinkable things. I never believed that, until the night I signed my life away to a stranger in an expensive suit. My name is Isabella, and this is how I learned that sometimes the cage you choose becomes the key to your freedom. At 27, I was drowning. My mother lay dying, her medical bills crushing me like waves against rocks. 2 jobs barely kept us afloat, and exhaustion had become my constant companion. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford when every hour not working meant another step closer to losing her. That fateful evening, my friend dragged me to a party in the hills, a mansion that screamed wealth from every marble surface. I felt like an imposter among the glittering crowd, clutching a glass of champagne I was afraid to drink, because it probably cost more than my weekly groceries. Then I saw him. Victor Blackwood stood across the room like a shadow in human form. His tailored suit darker than midnight, his eyes sharp as winter steel. When those cold eyes found mine, time seemed to pause. I couldn't understand why a man who commanded such presence would waste even a glance on someone like me. As the party wound down and rain began hammering the windows, he approached. His voice was velvet over ice when he asked, "Do you need a ride home?" The question felt loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. I said yes, not just because of the rain, but because something about him made my pulse quicken and my instincts scream warnings I chose to ignore. His car was a work of art, leather and luxury wrapping around us as he drove through the city lights. When he asked if I was hungry, I nodded, though food was the last thing on my mind. The restaurant he chose was the kind of place I'd only seen in movies: crystal chandeliers, hushed conversations, and prices that could feed a family for weeks. Across the candlelit table, Victor studied me, like I was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He barely touched his food, those penetrating eyes never leaving my face. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken intentions. Finally, he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the elegant atmosphere like a blade. "Isabella, I can see that life has been cruel to you. I'm a man of considerable wealth, and I find myself lonely. I have a proposition that could change everything for you." My heart hammered against my ribs as he continued. "I can offer you money more than you've ever imagined. Your mother could have the finest medical care. You'd never work another double shift or worry about another bill. All I ask in return is your companionship. Nothing more, nothing less." The words hit me like ice water. My rational mind screamed that this was wrong, dangerous, impossible. But the desperate daughter in me saw my mother's face, saw the stack of medical bills on my kitchen counter, saw a way out of the suffocating darkness that had become my life. Victor didn't smile as he waited for my answer. He simply watched with those unreadable eyes, offering me a deal with the devil dressed in designer clothes. In that moment, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and he was offering me wings, though I couldn't tell if they would help me fly or simply give me a more elegant way to fall. "Yes," I whispered, sealing my fate with a single word. The transformation was swift and surreal. One day I was serving coffee at dawn and filing papers until midnight. The next, I was living in a world I'd only glimpsed in magazines. Private jets carried us to distant cities where we stayed in hotels that felt more like palaces. Designer gowns replaced my worn work clothes, and jewelry worth more than my old annual salary adorned my neck. But Victor's mansion, despite its grandeur, felt like a beautiful prison. He laid out the rules with the same coldness he'd shown that first night. "I require loyalty, Isabella. Never question my business dealings, they don't concern you. And our arrangement remains strictly private." He handed me a contract filled with legal language that essentially made me his property in exchange for financial security. As I signed my name, I felt pieces of my soul crumbling away. I told myself it was for my mother, for survival, but the weight of what I'd become pressed down on me like stone. Living with Victor was like sharing space with a storm that might break at any moment. He was unpredictable, sometimes showing flashes of unexpected kindness, other times retreating behind walls of ice that I could never breach. Despite myself, I found my heart betraying my mind, developing feelings that had no place in our transaction. The mansion's beauty couldn't mask its emptiness. Each room echoed with secrets, and I began to feel like I was slowly disappearing within its walls. My pulse raced whenever Victor entered a room, though I couldn't tell if it was fear or something far more dangerous. One afternoon, curiosity led me to his private study. Among the leather-bound books and expensive artwork, a photograph caught my eye, a stunning woman with knowing eyes and a secret smile. When I asked Victor about her later, his reaction was swift and telling. He snatched the photo away, his face turning to granite as he muttered something about it being unimportant. But his desperate haste to hide it told a different story. Mrs. Whitmore, the elderly housekeeper who'd served Victor for decades, became my unlikely confidant. One quiet afternoon, she pulled me aside with urgency in her weathered eyes. "Miss Isabella," she whispered, "this house holds more secrets than you can imagine. Nothing here is as it seems. Trust carefully and watch your back." Her warning chilled me to the bone, but before I could ask what she meant, Victor appeared with news that would change everything again. "Need you to marry me," he announced without preamble, his voice as emotionless as if he were discussing the weather. My world tilted. "Marry you? But our arrangement—" "It's purely business," he cut me off. "I need a wife on paper for a merger. Nothing between us changes. You'll still live here, still receive your payments. It's just another contract, Isabella. Will you sign it?" Standing before a judge with no family or friends present, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars, I felt like an actress playing a role in someone else's story. Mrs. Whitmore and a lawyer served as witnesses to what felt more like a business transaction than a wedding. When Victor slipped the ring onto my finger, it felt cold and heavy, like a shackle disguised as jewelry. Becoming Mrs. Blackwood changed nothing and everything. In public, I played the perfect wife to perfection, smiling at charity galas and business dinners while dying inside. The loneliness was suffocating married to a man who saw me as an asset rather than a person, surrounded by wealth that felt meaningless when love was nowhere to be found. The facade cracked the day I brought Victor lunch at his office and heard shouting echoing through the halls. A woman's voice, raw with fury and heartbreak, cut through the air like broken glass. "You promised me," she screamed. 10 years, Victor. 10 years I waited for you to marry me, and you marry some child instead." I froze as her rage turned toward me when she spotted me in the doorway. "You," she snarled, pointing at me with trembling fingers. "You stole my life." He was mine first. Her name was Sophia, and her accusations shattered everything I thought I knew about my arrangement with Victor. If our marriage was purely business, why had he promised this woman a real future? The questions multiplied when I discovered text messages on his phone from other women, intimate messages that suggested I wasn't the only secret in Victor's carefully constructed world. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. I realized I'd been naive to think I was special, that our connection meant anything to him. I was just another asset in his portfolio, another tool in whatever game he was playing. And start being a player. I hired Marcus Kane, a private investigator who specialized in corporate secrets. Using Victor's own money, I began unraveling the web of lies that surrounded my husband's empire. What Marcus discovered made my blood run cold. Victor's wealth came from a network of shell companies and illegal deals that stretched across continents. He laundered money through legitimate businesses, used false identities to avoid detection, and manipulated women like me to provide cover for his operations. But Marcus also revealed something Victor himself had forgotten. When we married, several of his companies had been legally transferred to my name, likely as a temporary tax shelter that he'd planned to reverse later. Mrs. Blackwood, Marcus said, sliding documents across the table. According to these papers, you own controlling interest in Blackwood Enterprises. Legally, he can't touch it without your signature. For the first time in months, I smiled. Victor had been so confident in his control over me that he'd handed me the keys to his kingdom without realizing it. The next year was a masterclass in patience and strategy. During the day, I played the devoted wife with Academy Award-worthy performance. I hung on Victor's arm at events, gazed at him adoringly at dinner parties, and never let my mask slip in public. He was pleased with my compliance, never suspecting that behind my smile lay a mind sharp as any blade. In private, I became a student of power. I studied his business dealings, learned the names of his associates, memorized the structure of his empire. I hired lawyers and accountants who helped me understand exactly what I controlled and how to use it. Every night while Victor slept, I planned my escape from the golden cage he'd built around me. Our first anniversary arrived like a countdown to my freedom. Victor came home that evening with champagne and that same cold smile I'd learned to hate. "Happy anniversary, Isabella," he said, raising his glass as if toasting another successful business deal. I looked at him across the opulent living room, no longer the desperate young woman he'd rescued from poverty. "Victor," I said, using his first name for the first time in months. His eyebrows raised in surprise. "I know," I continued simply. "Know what?" he asked, but something in my tone made him set down his glass. "I know about Sophia. I know about the others. I know about your money laundering, your false companies, your entire house of cards." I pulled out a folder, thick with documents. "And I know about the companies you signed over to me when we married." His face went through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, realization, and finally, rage. "How dare you investigate me? You're nothing without me. I own you." Stood slowly, feeling power flow through me like electricity. "Actually, Victor, according to these divorce papers, I own you. Or at least the parts of you that matter: your companies, your assets, your precious empire." His fury was volcanic, but beneath it, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. He knew I was right. He knew the law was on my side. "You can't do this," he snarled. "I made you. I gave you everything." "You gave me money," I corrected, walking toward the door. "And I used that money to buy myself an education in how power really works." "You thought you were keeping a pet, Victor. You never realized you were training a predator." I left that mansion the same way I'd entered it, with nothing but the clothes on my back. But this time, I walked away as one of the wealthiest women in the city, carrying with me the empire of the man who tried to own me. Freedom, I learned, isn't about escaping your cage. It's about discovering you held the key all along. Sometimes the very thing meant to destroy you becomes the foundation for your greatest triumph. Victor thought he was buying a companion, but what he really did was finance his own downfall. They say desperation makes you do unthinkable things. But sometimes, if you're clever enough and strong enough, those unthinkable things become the very salvation you never knew you needed. My name is Isabella Blackwood, and this is how I learned that the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting everything.